Joining us in the studio, Jeff Schulman, the next athletic director at the University of Vermont. Earlier this week, got officially named to that position. Jeff, congratulations on being the next AD, replacing Bob Corrin after his retirement. You're going to take over starting in July. And thank you so much for joining us here in person. We appreciate it.
Thanks, AJ. It's great to be with you guys.
What does this moment mean for not being here in this studio specifically? I'm talking about the
greatest moment of my life.
Yeah, the general moment of being named the next athletic director. You are a Buffalo native, but I mean, you played for the UVM hockey team, so you spent your college years here. You spent the vast majority of your professional life here, working your way up through the UVM athletic department at the administrative level. And to be at this point now where you went from college hockey player at UVM to running the athletic department at UVM coming up in a couple of months, how much does that mean to you? And is it like a dream job? Can you just describe what that's like to be in this position?
Well, I mean, it's a huge honor for me, and obviously, as you said, just that much more significant because of my history here and the fact that, you know, I was a student athlete at the University of Vermont. I've worked in the athletic department for so long. I feel like this community is my home. I feel like a Vermonter. So it's absolutely a huge honor. And in terms of, you know, my professional goals, for a long time I've wanted to be a director of athletics, and I think what distinguishes me a little bit from some of my colleagues who feel the same way at other schools is that my goal really has been to be the athletic director at one place, and that's at the University of Vermont. So it is, in terms of a professional accomplishment, it's really significant for me, and it's also a huge responsibility, and you know, something I really take seriously because of how much I care about the department and the university. And I'm also, I mentioned this the other day, but for me to follow in the footsteps of three athletic directors who, you know, have been real mentors for me and have done this job with such professionalism and integrity is something that's really meaningful. Denny Lambert and Rick Farnham and Bob Corrin, you know, I have deep relationships with each of them, and they're great friends and great mentors, so it's obviously a very exciting time for me.
Now, when Dr. Corrin announced he was stepping away, did your first thought kind of go towards, ooh, it's mine, here we go? I mean, did you immediately want that job?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, Bob and I have been talking now for, you know, several years, so it wasn't a surprise to me when he announced that this was going to be his last year. But I also know, you know, I know the higher ed world well enough to know that you know, that there would be a full national search and that there were no guarantees for me, and I accepted that, and I really, you know, I tried to pursue the job, you know, really aggressively and not take anything for granted, and you know, that can be delicate sometimes when you're on campus and people are, you know, watching and working with you every day and knowing that you're a candidate for the job. So it was been a little bit of a challenging year in that respect. But, you know, I just tried to be myself and be authentic. And, you know, fortunately, it's all worked out.
Can you explain, and we're talking with Jeff Schulman, the next athletic director at the University of Vermont, and because I think I feel like at least, when people have sometimes some criticisms or some complaints for administration, they think of the administration then, but perhaps on a day-to-day basis, those thoughts aren't there. They're not necessarily familiar with what people like you do on a day-to-day basis. So can you talk about what you've been doing as basically the second in command behind Bob at University of Vermont, and what your role has been, and also just what's your leadership style? What originally drove you to get into this profession in the first place, and to have the desire to eventually be at this point and want to be working as an administrator inside an athletic department?
Well, maybe I'll start with your second question first, and just say that, you know, I from the time I was really a young boy, I've just really enjoyed being around athletics and sports and playing sports, but also, you know, watching and paying attention to what was going on. I actually grew up in Buffalo, New York, right next to a middle school, and there was a playing field literally right next to my house, and I would be out there anytime there was something going on. I would be out there watching it, and my biggest thrill was when they would ask me to help out in some way, if I could be a ball boy or help with the clock or something like that. So, that goes back a long time. And even at UVM, my teammates used to always joke with me that when they couldn't find me, they would just go to whatever game was going on campus, and they would find me there. Field hockey, tennis, track, it didn't matter. So it's something that it's part of my DNA. So getting into this field was sort of a natural for me. And in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis, it really varies. It's a very dynamic kind of environment to work in, and it's something if you're passionate about sports and athletics, it's something that's really fun. I mean, there's some challenging, difficult days, but it's really enjoyable work. I work closely with our student athletes. I obviously work really closely with our coaches on all sorts of issues, scheduling issues, facility issues, budget issues, some player issues, recruiting issues. Some of my specific responsibilities, I oversee all of the financial operations of the department. I oversee all of our capital facility projects, so that's kind of planning these projects, working with donors to try to make them become a reality, working on permitting, working ultimately with construction management to try to get projects done. I supervise sport programs, work closely with coaches. It's a real variety, and then it's all in the context of higher education, which is something that's really unique. Is that this isn't professional sports. It's not like we're the Boston Bruins or the Montreal Canadiens, and we're part of an educational institution, and that's something that's really important for our fans to remember. I think it's part of the draw of UVM athletics, but sometimes people forget and just think, all we're here to do is win games, and certainly that's part of it, and winning's really important to us, but it's in the context of education and developing our student athletes.
Jeff, and you're not really stepping in, I guess, for a couple of months, but at the same time, are you playing a big role? I mean, I assume you must be at this point, along with Dr. Corin, in timeline-wise, probably the number one priority, and that would be the women's basketball coach.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm chairing our search committee, and I spent a lot of time on that today. We had a search committee meeting. I'm on the phone with candidates constantly, really, at this point, and it's absolutely a high priority. This program, our women's basketball program, means a lot to our department, and I think people who've been around this community for a long time. And Rich, you remember the days, and I remember when I first came back to work at UVM in the early to mid '90s. I mean, the energy at Patrick Gymnasium for those women's games was incredible, and something we haven't seen in a long, long time. So we know the potential exists, and this is a really important hire for the department and for me personally. And so, we're going to try to move as quickly as we possibly can on it, but we also want to be thorough and make sure we get the right person who's a good fit for our institution in every way.
I'm certain we'll get to the other big priority, which you've talked about before, in the facility in the arena, and we'll get to that coming up. We're speaking with Jeff Schulman, next UVM AD here on the AJ and Rich Show, live with us in studio. But first this, you've spoken about in a couple different, I believe, times talking with the media, whether it be the press conference to announce you as the next AD or even the open forum beforehand. I believe you've said that you feel like you want to be more external as the next AD than perhaps some of the previous ADs have been. Can you explain what you mean by that, and why do you feel like that's important?
Sure. I think that any administrator, has to focus his or her attention on the needs of the time in the context that they're coming into. And I think right now there's little doubt in my mind, and I think in others' mind, that one of the paths for us to really move forward is to raise more money. Increase our philanthropic support, specifically to support some really important facility projects, and the event center being number one on that list. But we've also, we've got a major project to finish off our soccer lacrosse complex, Virtue Field, which we're going to be doing a significant amount of work this summer. And so, the way I think that I can best help our student athletes and our university and our athletic department is to be more externally focused and out more raising money with donors. And that's not a criticism at all of Bob or Rick or Denny or the other people. They dealt with the challenges that existed when they were in that role. And Bob in particular, when he came in, I mean, our department looked very different than it does today. We have 60 more scholarships than today than we had when Bob arrived 13 years ago, and we have Virtue Field, we have Levack Track, we have Molten Winder Field. So, Bob was focused on those projects and building sort of an infrastructure for our department, and I think he's had a highly successful run as athletic director, and my job is to elevate the department, and one of the critical ways to do that is through raising more money.
Well, can you extend this, as you mentioned there, really it relates to the arena, but when you talk about raising more money and taking extra efforts as far as those philanthropic causes and beefing up fundraising for the university, how do you plan to basically, and you sort of talked about how it could just be, if I'm reading into what you said correctly, it could just be an effort thing, partially, in terms of just what you're focusing on, but how will you be better? What is your vision to be better fundraising, or let's say raise it up another level than UVM has been?
I think it's a really good question, AJ, and I think it's a couple things. One is I think we need to have a really clear direction around some of our projects, specifically the event center. And one of my top priorities over the next few months with President Sullivan and with other leaders at the university is going to be to really chart a course forward on this event center that we've been talking about for so long, and we've had some really exciting developments in the last couple of months. The proposal coming out of the city of South Burlington, and the city of Burlington is also in discussions now about how to redevelop the block that Memorial Auditorium sits on, and an arena is very much part of their vision of that block. So all of a sudden we've got these two pretty exciting options. So I think, we've got to chart a course, evaluate what would ultimately be in the best interest of our university, of our students, of our athletic department, our teams, and move forward. And then it's putting in the time out on the road, visiting with donors, and that's how you raise money. Is you go out and you talk to them and you express your vision and you get them excited about what we're doing, and talk to them about how their investment in UVM athletics is going to make a difference. And I think everybody in this community recognizes how important it is that we move forward on this project.
Well, can I clarify? I know, Rich, you have some questions too. Can I clarify something quickly? So I might be misunderstanding this, but what you just said right there, I didn't get a chance to hear the entire press conference, so it could be something where you've already spoken about this, but did that mean that there are three distinct options as far as UVM, potentially the South Burlington plan, and a plan off campus in Burlington, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, I think you heard that correctly. I mean, we've been our vision for the last several years has been around a campus-centric project, an event center on campus. And then recently this proposal came up from South Burlington to partner with the university on an event center that would serve the community needs and the university's needs. And then the city of Burlington has been talking as well for probably the last month or so about how to redevelop this Memorial Auditorium site. And one of their concepts is for a multipurpose arena that we could potentially be an anchor tenant in. So there are a few different options to vet, and that's what I was describing, is really sitting down with President Sullivan and our other university leaders on campus and ultimately our board of trustees and saying, all right, of these options, and one of the critical things is what's the most viable of all this. This is very much at the preliminary stages, conceptual stages. So to really understand, the benefits of each of these options and how viable they may be, and then make a decision about what direction we want to pursue in conjunction, with these communities, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I heard about the memorial thing, and every now and then, every 10 years or so, you hear something might happen. All I remember about memorial are concerts and the Champlain basketball team.
Yeah,
that's pretty. I know. That was pretty much what it is, and it just, you look at that situation, you wonder, where in the world is that a big arena going to be put? Where's the parking? It's tricky.
There's no question. There's a lot of questions to be answered about all of these concepts, and that's why I'm just saying that's the priority, is to really understand what can happen in these different locations, what the finances look like in all of these deals. I don't think there's any question that with any of these concepts, the university is going to have to raise a significant amount of money, and that ultimately will be my focus.
Right, and the memorial thing, I'd assume, would involve taxpayers of Burlington, which can be quite a struggle.
Well, I don't know that that's the case. I think, okay. But that the details, as they're as they're determined, I'm sure will come out and be discussed publicly.
Let me ask you, as a guy who's been on campus for as long as you have and a former hockey player, and of course Gutterson and Patrick and so many great memories there, deep down in your heart, would you like to have a facility on campus as opposed to any of the others?
It's a good question. I think there's certainly some advantages to being on campus, and as you mentioned, my history is that I played at Gutterson Fieldhouse, and there is nothing quite like skating out on that ice and looking up and seeing the crowd and just the energy of that facility. And Patrick's got amazing energy as well when it's full. And our students are really important to us, and we want to make sure that whatever we do accommodates our students in a really appropriate fashion, because they bring an energy to our games that it's just hard. It's hard to match, and we're also blessed with incredible community support. It's one of the things when we travel around and we talk to our colleagues in America East and Hockey East that they're so envious of. And AJ, you get around the conference and you see a lot of empty buildings around America East, and so we want to make sure that we're catering to the community as well. And in some respects, a building slightly off campus may actually be more convenient for our community fans. And we're talking about very short distance. I mean, both the couple of the proposed sites in South Burlington and the Burlington site are within a mile of the radius of the campus. So
that's a little different than like the main, like Bangor.
Exactly.
Very far away from their campus.
But those are all the things that we're going to have to really look at and weigh and trying to make a decision about what direction we go.
Current Senior Associate AD Jeff Schulman will be the next University of Vermont Athletic Director, and there certainly are some valid questions about the selection that Tom Sullivan made, and that you were named the lone finalist by the Search Advisory Committee. So certainly they were a big factor in this decision as well. And I brought this up on the show before, so certainly, and I know you've had a chance to answer a couple of these questions the last few days as well, but I'll give you a chance to address it again now. As far as the ability for you to bring fresh ideas and opinions to the table, in an athletic department that has had the same athletic director for the last 13 years, and I've spoken with a few people inside the athletic department, and I think there are everybody respects you, including us, and has a lot of confidence that you'll be able to do a good job and that you're qualified to do the job. But also, I've spoken to some people that have commented on the desire to exact a bit of a culture change inside the athletic department. So how do you feel like you are qualified to do that when you have been on the inside for such a long period of time?
That's a good question. It's something that I've thought a lot about, and I think I will need to challenge myself to look at things through a fresh lens and not just accept the status quo, because that's the way we've been doing things for a long time. And I certainly recognize the need for some cultural changes within our department. And again, that's not a criticism of anybody. It's just any organization needs to evolve and grow and develop. And
do you mind if I cut? Maybe it's doing a service to everybody, including this almost goes to my question a little bit in a place where I wasn't specific enough, but maybe you can be. It's when you say culture changes, what comes to mind as well as far as culture changes that could be needed, or if you could try to be more specific than that.
Well, I think it's also, I think everybody recognizes that when there's, a change in the leadership of a department or organization, the organization changes. The department will be much more a reflection of my leadership style once I become the athletic director. There's a few things that come to mind. One of them we already talked about is just that the athletic director being much more externally focused and spending more time on the road and working with our donors and trying to raise more money and generate more revenue. I think that we need to make sure that we're supporting our revenue-producing programs and our higher-profile programs at a level that will allow them to have as much competitive success as possible. And that's challenging. We have 18 varsity sports, and we care about every student-athlete that we have equally. But the reality is that we have certain programs that generate more revenue and generate more attention and can help us move the needle in unique ways. And I think everybody in our department recognizes that. And I think everybody wants to support, our hockey program and our basketball programs and, our skiing programs and a national contender. Excuse me. So, those are some of the things that I'm talking about. And I want, I want our coaches and our student athletes to feel empowered in what they do. I want them to feel energized. I want them to feel that they can be creative, that they can try things, that they can, make mistakes. And, those are some of the things that I think about when I think about the kind of culture that I'd like to see really permeating our department.
Well, we're looking forward to the beginning of your tenure, which is going to start on July 1st. Jeff Schulman, the next AD at UVM, thank you so much for taking the time. And once again, congratulations on being hired in the job.
Thanks, guys. Great to be with you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff, in studio with us there. If you missed any part of that conversation, all of the AJ and Rich shows are posted online at the 1013ESPN.com audio vault and on the AJ and Rich podcast page on iTunes to hear back parts of the show or interviews that you missed.
It's AJ and Rich on 1013 ESPN at 960 The Zone.